I go back 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, suggesting that I think statins might be the biggest hoax ever perpetrated on the American public by the medical community.
Hey there, I'm Andy Petronic, the co-founder of the Whole Life Challenge, and welcome to episode 154 of the Andy Petronic Podcast. This is a show about raising the bar, improving your life, and transforming your health, fitness, and well-being. My guests are people who are recognized leaders, thinkers, and movers and shakers, whose stories, knowledge, and personal strategies will help you generate ideas that inspire you to action. First things first, I wanted to just express my gratitude that you're showing up, you're here. You allow me, your presence in these podcasts, your downloads, and you're sharing this with your friends and neighbors and family and people you think would get value from it, allow me to keep doing this. And I love to have these long, meaningful, deep conversations with thought leaders who are committed to helping advance the world towards wellness. And you being here makes me able to do that. So thank you. My guest today is none other than Mark Sisson. He is originally of Mark's Daily Apple. He then later became the author of Primal Blueprint, and he's the founder, I don't know if he's still CEO, I think he's just founder of Primal Kitchen, which you may even have some of his products in your house and not know it. His mayonnaise, he's got a new ketchup, really cool stuff. And he's been a massive influencer in the world of the paleo, in the paleo movement, now in the keto movement. And he'll be coming up in a second. I wanted to catch you guys up on a few things going on with me. The first thing is I've got a new title in the Whole Life Challenge. I'm no longer co-CEO with Michael Stanwyck. He and I both decided, this is about 6 months ago. Look, there are really great things about being co-CEOs, but there are also some really big challenges being co-CEOs. And one of those is there's no unity of command. There's no one person making decisions. And leadership by committee, while in some situations can work, and we've made it work for quite some times, it's slow, it's cumbersome, it's much more difficult to make decisions. And rather than put one of us over the other, Michael and I decided that we decided partly because we didn't want to do that, and partly because our chief marketing officer, John Gilson, is incredibly well qualified to be the CEO of the Whole Life Challenge, that we do that. And we made John Gilson our CEO. And man, it was an incredibly good move because John doesn't have any trouble making decisions. John doesn't have any trouble helping me and Michael create our place. Kind of like I equate it to like swimming in lane lines. Like we each need our lane line to swim in. Otherwise it's chaos. And my new lane line, I call myself the chief evangelist, and my job is to talk to people. My job is to be out in the world talking to people, whether it's individuals or groups of people, whether it's establishing a coaching program, which I'm working on, or it is talking to companies and giving keynote speeches or just talks about wellness and well-being. In fact, I had my first corporate speaking engagement. We talked about strategies for wellness in life. We talked about strategy for wellness in the workplace. We talked about using the Whole Life Challenge as a vehicle for that to a company that is doing the Whole Life Challenge as a company, they're doing it for the first time. And it was a room of about, somewhere between 80 and 100 people. And man, as nerve-wracking as public speaking can be, and as you guys don't know this, but I've had a couple really traumatic public speaking incidents, for lack of a better word, that really traumatized me, have been traumatizing me now for like 30 years. So as potentially horrible as that could have gone, it was phenomenal. It went really, really, really well. And I really look forward to continuing doing that. So if you're a leader of a company that would like to have me out, or you're in human resources, or you're just an interested party that wants to have me out to talk to your group or your company, especially in Los Angeles, it's a lot easier to do it here because I'm here. Just send me an email at podcast@wholelifechallenge.com and we can make it happen. I've also, a lot of you guys know this, but I have a monthly newsletter. It's called Stepping Up. It's in it, I share very succinct, bullet point, pithy blurbs about things I'm reading, discovering, using, strategies I'm employing to improve my life and to improve my work life, my personal life, my wellness life. And it usually comes out once a month, although October 1, I was so swamped in work with the start of the Whole Life Challenge and other things, I made a strategic or tactical decision not to send one out. And instead of sending an email that says, hey guys, I'm not going to send one out this month, I just didn't send it out. And Mark Sisson has been a force in the paleo movement, the paleo world, and the health and wellness world since, well, really since as long as I've known him. In 2008, he started Mark's Daily Apple, which was a blog that talked about health and wellness. Mark was exploring paleo at the time, and so paleo became a big part of that blog, and it led to his publishing of a book called The Primal Blueprint, which kind of outlined his methods for going paleo. He's also a New York Times bestselling author with a book called The Keto Reset Diet. And prior to all that, prior to him being a health and wellness guy, he was an athlete. He was an endurance runner, marathon runner. And when I say he was a runner, he was an elite runner. You know, his marathon times were faster than 2 hours and 30 minutes. And then he got involved in Ironman, way in the early days of Ironman, right around I think it was in the late 70s, actually. And when he retired from running with various injuries, running in triathlons with various injuries and aches and pains, he decided to try to do his best to help other people not make the same mistakes in athletics that he did. And he wanted to spend his time educating the world on health and well-being. And that's really what he's done. He is a wealth of knowledge and information and experience because, one of the things, if you know Mark, like I do, you know that he is the epitome of an N=1 experiment, meaning the N=1 is him. He experiments on himself, and he plays with things and tries things, and then he writes about those things, and he watches the responses that people have when they try them, and keeps what works and throws out what doesn't work. In this podcast, I try to stick to a formula in this particular podcast of talking about the 7 daily habits in the Whole Life Challenge. So we talk a whole bunch about nutrition. We talk about paleo. We talk about keto. We talk about cholesterol. We talk about statins and triglycerides and homocysteine levels and inflammation. We really dive into a lot of topics related to food, diet, and its impact on the inflammation in your system and how that works. We talk about sleep, and we talk about stretching, and we talk about meditation. In fact, Mark makes a commitment to me in the podcast. You will hear it on air, that something he's never done around meditation before. You'll have to listen for it later on in the podcast. But it was really a pleasure to have him on, and I'm really looking forward to getting him in here now. So let's do it. 3, 2, 1, off we go. Mark Sisson. Mark Sisson, welcome back to the podcast.
Andy, great to be back. Thanks for having me.
It's funny, right before we got on and I started telling you that I always go down wormholes with you, and I'm going to try not to go down wormholes, but I don't know if it's possible for me.
Hey, let's treat it like a meditation, Andy. Let's let the mind wander a little bit and then come back to center.
Exactly. The problem with me is a little bit tends to, expand.
Yeah.
So we'll try not to do that. We were just talking about the craziness of yesterday. I try to make these podcasts as evergreen as possible, but given the Chris Kresser podcast with Joe Rogan, and what's the doctor that was on there? What's his name?
Joe Kahn.
Yeah. Just some interesting things that they talked about. The biggest part of that was talking about cholesterol and saturated fat, and it went back and forth and back and forth, and I mean literally like 2 hours with no real resolution. But I think it's a really, and I was telling you also before the podcast that a really good friend of mine who's in the business, who's a fitness trainer, his legs are all cramped up and he's got all these leg pains because of the statins he's been on for a long time. And so I think it's a really good topic, a really good conversation topic that we all need to keep fresh. And I just wanted to ask you about it, like how you navigate those waters.
Well, I navigate them cautiously because, you have to be careful about making blanket statements. But I go back 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, suggesting that I think statins might be the biggest hoax ever perpetrated on the American public by the medical community. We know through research recently and over the last 2 decades actually, but even more recently confirmed, that oxidation and inflammation are the proximate causes of heart disease and arteriosclerosis or atherosclerosis. So when we talk about that issue and risk factors, and we look at, is high cholesterol a risk factor for heart disease? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if you look at different cohorts of cholesterol, you know that people with cholesterol over 220 versus people with cholesterol under 140, those under 140 die of all-cause mortality at a greater rate and perhaps suffer a lower quality of life. So, is cholesterol the culprit here? Probably not. Look, cholesterol is one of the most important molecules in the human body. We make it whether or not we eat it. I mean, we make 13 or 1,400 milligrams of cholesterol a day. It's an integral part of cell membranes, and it's an integral part of the sex hormone system. It's an integral part of our making vitamin D, which is one of the most important vitamins in the body. It's the brain has lots of cholesterol components in it. So to vilify cholesterol and then take drugs that lower cholesterol seems to be a poor choice, especially given the fact that I forget the statistics here, but I think it's like 224 is the NNT, the number needed to treat. So 224 people have to take a statin in order for one cardiac event to be avoided. So If you look at all of the problems with taking statins, because statin drugs also deplete CoQ10, an important enzyme in the human body, that's where you get the muscle cramping, you get, maybe liver issues, you get fuzzy thinking, you get a lot of different issues in quality of life from having taken a statin that aren't necessarily worth your contribution to that 224 people needed to save one life, I guess, is probably what we would use as the metric. So, my take on it is, first of all, I always look to diet. How can I impact my risk factors through diet first rather than taking drugs? And if we can have a low or an anti-inflammatory diet by eliminating those foods that are pro-inflammatory. Those would be, processed grains, processed foods, foods with very high in sugar, absolutely foods with industrial seed oils in them, things like soybean oil, canola oil, corn oil, things like that. So by eliminating those inflammatory foods, we eliminate a large part of the whole reason that cholesterol ever gets called into action to act as a Band-Aid on the arterial walls in the first place.
But
we're already going down a rabbit hole here.
A little bit. I mean, we're still on topic. I'm not going to pull it away from the cholesterol topic. Yeah. So, but that still is not necessarily going to lower somebody's cholesterol. So how do you, the
diet?
Yeah, the anti-inflammatory stuff. I mean, I totally get what you're saying, but it's still not. If they go in and get a blood test, it's not necessarily going to lower their cholesterol. So, are there other numbers in the blood test that you look at that would be more telling?
CRP, C-reactive protein, homocysteine. There are a number of other things. Triglycerides, high triglycerides. These are all potential factors in the risk factors in heart disease that I think are much more important and pertinent to whether or not you're going to have a cardiac event than just your straight cholesterol numbers.
So do you advise people to just not even pay attention to cholesterol at all?
Oh God, no. And that's where we get, when I say I have to be cautious about this, You talk to somebody like Peter Attia, who's been a big, fan of paleo diets and has been a keto experimenter for a long time. He'll still say that, you still have to get the blood work done, maybe a scan done. You still have to understand whether your own genetics is predisposing you in a way that cholesterol might be a factor. Some people, high cholesterol has zero implication on their heart disease risk. Others, it's still a big factor. If you have familial hypercholesterolemia, could be a big issue. Having said that, I still think there are ways that you can mitigate the risk by decreasing inflammation
rather than hopping on statins.
Yeah.
Right. Well, what kinds of things would someone notice if they got onto a anti-inflammatory diet as opposed to lowering of cholesterol? What other things are going to show up as like, oh yeah, this is working?
Well, if you have systemic inflammation or some form of inflammation that's not related to an acute traumatic event like a sprained ankle or a cut, if you have systemic inflammation that's a result of your diet, for instance, you're probably retaining water. So one of the first things you see in reducing those inflammatory foods is a loss of water weight. The systemic edema throughout the body decreases. This is one of the reasons back in the days of The Biggest Loser, when you'd see somebody who would lose 25 or 28 pounds the first week, and you go, well, Jesus, I mean, that, if you do the math, there's no way you can lose that much fat in 1 week.
Yep.
What they're losing is water, and they're losing water in a combination of depleting glycogen a little bit because of the cutting of calories, but mostly because they're removing the offensive foods. They're causing the inflammation. And with it, the body says, okay, I'm going to decrease inflammation. I'm going to get rid of the edema, the water, the swelling that accompanies that. A lot of people on a anti-inflammatory diet notice a decrease in pain throughout their bodies. I mean, even if it's just like morning stiffness, getting out of bed kind of pain, or if it's, pain in walking. I mean, I was a runner for a long time, and I had osteoarthritis, and when I was in my 40s, I started to develop arthritis in my fingertips, and I thought that was just a natural artifact of being, in my 40s. Mm-hmm. And yet, when I got rid of the offensive foods, in my case, it was grains. When I got rid of grains, that pain, that arthritis, that stiffness, that swelling, that all went away. It subsided completely, never to return, by the way.
Wow.
Yet, anyway. I just turned 65, so it's been almost 20 years since I really made that final shift in my diet.
Are you completely grain free? Like, do you ever have bread when you go to eat? Or?
I'm not completely grain free. I once in a while, the smell of a nice yeasty bread will overwhelm me, and I'll have a couple of bites. Uh-huh. But as Ronald Reagan used to say, and I think Dirty Harry before that, a man's got to know his limitations, right? And so I know that my limitation is 3 or 4 bites, and that's all I need. And
right.
And if I have more than that, if I have a full big old slice of bread, even with butter on it, I'll feel it the next day. It'll have an impact on me. And that impact is largely, I suspect, from the gluten. But 2 or 3 bites is not going to be an issue for me, and I'm not going to, just for the sake of maintaining an absolutely clean diet and giving up on some of life's little pleasures, I'm not going to deny myself that couple of bites.
Yep. And you know that because of your willingness to test, right? I mean,
absolutely. That's a great point. Yeah.
I mean, you've been a great example for me of the N=1 experiment. Like I'm like, you're going for it and you're trying it out and you experiment and see what works and see what doesn't work. Because taking somebody else's word for it, while it may work for them, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you.
Yeah, and I think I've come to a realization in the last couple of years that I think human nature is very interesting. We like to see what we can get away with, and I think it comes down to FOMO. Fear of missing out. So if I take someone else's word for it that XYZ foods are bad for me and I eliminate them completely from my life, I don't know whether that was actually beneficial, that my eliminating them was beneficial. And this fear of missing out on, in this case, a great tasting, gustatory sensation, might have not been necessary. Might not have been necessary to eliminate those foods. So we sort of we see what we can get away with. We push ourselves up to the edge. And so in my case, And I think it's a great, people doing, Whole Life Challenge or a Whole 30 or any elimination program or anything like that. You go through this rigorous period of eliminating what you would perceive to be offensive foods. And then if you slowly introduce them back in your diet and you notice the difference or not, that's that experiment that I encourage people to do.
Right.
But I don't just say, you have to absolutely reject all these foods. Don't ever eat another nightshade because I read that nightshades are problematic for some people. Don't ever eat any more gluten because maybe you're not gluten sensitive. Don't ever eat dairy because, that A-type casein protein is problematic for some people. No, experiment and then incorporate what you would like to incorporate in your life with the knowledge that of what works and what doesn't work.
Right. Well, it's just a powerful place to come from too. It's and it gets you taking action as opposed to just reading about it and wondering. Just get into gear. Yeah, I wrote a little Instagram or something yesterday when I said 90% of the time the problem is not in needing more information. The problem is in getting started. And
no, I mean that's a great observation, and there's a point at which you have to understand, particularly in science and particularly in dietary science, there are no right answers. Right. There's no black or white. There's no good or bad. There's no right or wrong. They're just choices. And so as long as you make a choice based on, your belief system and your and what you perceive to be the best possible information, there's a point at which no more information is going to change your mind. And now it's a question of just, like you say, just taking action.
And optimizing and figuring out, okay, 3 or 4 bites. Okay, cool. You probably tested out a slice and that didn't work. Yeah. And then you tested out nothing at all. And okay, well that works. So there's something in between.
For sure. I mean, alcohol is a toxin. In small doses, it's probably appropriate for most people. Not appropriate. I mean, it's acceptable and tolerable for most people. But what's the limit? In my case, if I have 2 glasses of red wine, I'll feel pretty good when I go to bed, and then I'll wake up at 2:00 in the morning and I won't sleep for an hour or two, and then I'll notice a little bit in the morning. If I have 1 glass of red wine, I'm fine. So I know my limit there. And if I have no wine, I feel better. So you have to sort of play off all of these different scenarios.
Yep.
But with the knowledge that you've done the work and you've done the experimentation and the ramifications of your choice, that's really all I want for people to understand. I don't care if you go out and have a whole piece of Cheesecake Factory cheesecake, or the whole cake itself. I don't care. It's your choice, and just as long as you know what you're getting yourself into, when you make that decision. That's all Mark's Daily Apple has ever been about. About allowing people the opportunity to make informed choices and then be responsible for those choices.
Well, since we're on the conversation about diet and we kind of shifted gears a little bit from the cholesterol part, why don't we talk a little bit about fasting? Because it seems to be a very hot topic. It is a very hot topic. It's something I play around with. I try to fit my meals into about an 8-hour window. I was shocked when I eliminated my breakfast that I didn't lose, 10 pounds. And I'm like, where was all that food going? And, flush away, I'm sure. For what reason? I mean, no apparent reason.
It's the first sort of major epiphany people have, especially if they've done a little bit of keto work. If you've really eliminated carbs and you've gotten down to this strategy of using a ketogenic eating style to fine tune your metabolism. We call it metabolic flexibility, to be able to burn fat much more efficiently, to be able to access ketones much more efficiently. If you've done that work, and then you find that appetite, hunger, and cravings sort of subside, and you realize I can wake up in the morning and I don't have to eat because I have all the energy I need to get my day started. One of the first epiphanies people have is, well, geez, I was eating way too much food because that third meal was just unnecessary. And I think you're finding throughout this genre of sort of intermittent fasting and keto and low carb, that there is now this tendency toward what we call a compressed eating window. And I we're recording this. It's 1:00. I haven't eaten yet today. I'll probably eat after this podcast, and then I'll eat one more time tonight. And I'll enjoy every bite of food I eat, and I won't enter those meals with sort of ravenous hunger. I'll just, just eat them because I feel like eating them. I'm hungry enough to eat, enough to satisfy me. It's a very, very powerful position to find yourself in, to know that you can get by on probably 30% fewer calories than you once thought you required to maintain muscle mass, maintain energy, not get sick, and to not be hungry.
Hey guys, pardon the interruption, but I've got to let you know that this episode is brought to you today by The Good Kitchen. The Good Kitchen produces Whole Life Challenge compliant meals that are organic, that are from sustainably sourced farms from all over the eastern seaboard, North Carolina, South Carolina, from just farmers that they know personally. Well, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them. And they create these delectable meals that are convenient. They come right to your doorstep. They are packaged extremely well. They can be heated up in a microwave. They can be heated up on the stovetop. They make your life easy. Whether it's for lunch every day, whether it's for dinner every day, whether it's for lunch and dinner every day. If you've never tried getting like high quality meals delivered to you before and seeing what that's like, you owe it to yourself to give it a shot. And The Good Kitchen is a great way to do that. We have a deal for listeners, 15% off your first order. So you can use this coupon code, this link, thegoodkitchen.com/WLC. So check it out. You'll be glad you did. There's this magic number of 1,200 calories that a registered dietitian won't create a meal plan under, for fear of like you'll become malnourished. What does that do to that? I mean, that whole theory. Let's say you're eating a 1,200 calorie diet now. Now, obviously, this is not me and you because we're bigger and we burn more calories than that each day. But and then you decide, okay, I'm going to cut out one of my 3 meals, and now I'm down to 800 calories. Like, is there a limit of? Is that something you just got to play with and experiment with, or?
Yeah, I mean, it depends a lot on your age, your size, your sex. By gender, and
right.
There are a lot of factors here. So if you're a very overweight person who's recently become metabolically flexible, then 800 calories a couple of days in a row might not be a bad choice,
right?
Because what you grow to understand is that your body is burning off stored body fat to make up for the difference. And as long as those 800 calories are, say, 75 grams of protein, which by the way is only 300 calories, and then 50 grams of fat, which is only 450 calories, what am I saying? Let's not do the fat. Let's just do protein. So you got that's right. 300 grams of protein and 450 of fat is 750 calories, and you don't need the carbs because you're making ketones.
Yeah.
So you can do the math and go, well, that's actually a sustainable program for some people.
Right.
The way I prefer to look at it is not how much am I eating on a daily basis, or even on because the old paradigm was to look at it on a meal to meal basis. Like, you got to have 20 grams of protein at every meal and a little bit of carbs at every meal, and don't go more than 3 hours without eating because you'll cannibalize your muscle tissue and all this other nonsense.
Right.
That's changed a lot. That's shifted a lot because of this recognition that we have this innate metabolic flexibility that we can reacquire by training our bodies through eating, and that training requires that we restrict carbohydrates substantially to force the body into burning fat, and then to become good at utilizing ketones, and in so doing, increasing mitochondria, which are the areas in which the cells are able to create energy by burning fat. So all those things come into play, and now I look at like macros more on a weekly basis, like how many, like in a week, how many grams of protein do I need, or maybe every 3 or 4 days, but not on a daily basis, because some days I'm not going to eat at all, and I don't want that to be, indicative of or contributing to some outlier in an otherwise carefully crafted macro schedule, right? I just look at, okay, did I get enough protein intuitively over the last 4 days? And even if I didn't get any yesterday because I took the day off and I fasted, it doesn't matter because the body doesn't use protein from hour to hour, or it doesn't require intake of protein from hour to hour, or even day to day, because there are all these mechanisms in the body that preserve amino acids and recycle amino acids and generate amino acids in some cases. So I look at the macro thing like, okay, if you're a petite woman, I know a lot of women, by the way, who claim that 1,200 calories a day is all they need, and I believe them. Mm-hmm. I know that it doesn't. If you're metabolically efficient and you're extracting energy not only from the food you eat, but from stored body fat, and you're literally recycling some of that energy almost as a closed system by creating ketones from the fat and offsetting the need to take in glycogen. It may be that we find out in a few years that people have much lower daily caloric requirements than we assumed when we were basing everything on a carbohydrate-based eating strategy.
Right. Calorie-based. Yeah. And yeah, totally. I mean, that's what I'm...
But when I say carbohydrate, we were basing everything up until, 10 years ago. All of the U.S. Department of Agricultural recommendations were based on a 2,000 calorie a day diet, but it was large. It was, there were a lot of carbohydrates.
Right.
It was still a carb-centric diet.
Yep.
And so that whole carb thing was what it drove hunger because of the probably the excessive amount of carbohydrates that most people ate, and then which in turn, raised insulin, which then had this roller coaster effect on glycogen storage and fat storage and blood sugar levels and leptin and ghrelin balances and hunger in general.
So the idea behind fasting is generally to give your body a break, right? Over a extended period of time. Sometimes it's just over 12 or 14 hours from the need to secrete insulin. I mean, that's really one of the easiest ways. That's the easiest way that I have to explain it. But is that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the mantra that I use is that all the good shit happens when you're not eating.
Right.
So all the good stuff in your body happens when you're not eating. Eating is in and of itself pro-inflammatory. Eating is a necessary, task once in a while to add coal to the coal bin.
Right.
To add fuel to the storage tanks. But all the good stuff happens when we're not eating. All the repair, all the regeneration, all of the upregulation of certain anti-aging genes, all of the enzyme systems that are involved in metabolizing fat and building the metabolic machinery to utilize ketones. That all happens when you're not eating. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I want. That's a picture I want to paint for some people. It's like, yeah. And by the way, don't get me wrong. I'm a hedonist, so I like pleasure and I like to enjoy life and I like to extract the greatest amount of enjoyment, contentment, fulfillment, pleasure, whatever you want to use as an adjective for savoring every moment of life. And that certainly includes food. And I enjoy every bite of food I eat. But I just recognize that I used to eat way too much, even as recently as 3 or 4 years ago.
Yep.
More than I needed. And the more I go down this pathway and the more I'm seeing the effects of becoming more and more metabolically flexible, the more I'm realizing that as a nation, that's our biggest problem. We just eat too damn many calories. And that's probably the biggest solution to the world hunger situation is this overconsumption of calories across the board for Americans. And if we could get all to a point where we realize that we don't need 3 meals a day, that breakfast isn't the most important meal of the day.
Right.
And that if we can develop this metabolic flexibility and become metabolically efficient, a lot of great things happen to us.
What is your take on coffee? What things would break a fast? Like if you put butter in your coffee, like I have butter in my coffee and coconut oil, I don't count that in my fasting out window. Have you experimented with that to see if there's a difference?
Well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I do drink coffee, but I have maybe enough heavy cream in it to change the color of it a little bit. And so I have coffee, but I don't put calories in coffee. And I people have different theories about the fast and breaking the fast. I feel like I'm not going to, that's not fasting for me if I have butter in my coffee, or if I have MCT oil or butter. If I have 200 or 300 calories in my coffee, that's not fasting.
Got it.
In my mind. Now, that doesn't mean that your body's not burning fat.
Right.
So the effect, it's like, what are you intending to do here? Are you intending to not eat, which is a fast, or are you intending to burn only fat for the first, 7 or 8 hours of your being awake during the day? In which case, having those calories, the butter, the MCT oil in your coffee, doesn't conflict with that intention of burning fat. You will be burning fat.
Right.
But my sense is I want to consume the layers, the copious layers of subcutaneous fat on my body, of which there aren't. I'm just joking because there aren't that many.
Yeah, right. It's right. If you guys out there have ever seen a picture of Mark, he's definitely joking.
But the irony there is I still have enough fat to live for days without eating.
Yep. That's
just the nature. Look, I'm 168 pounds now, and I'm 10% body fat. Call that 17 pounds of fat. There's probably 10 pounds of fat on me that are not absolutely essential to survival. So 10 pounds of fat, that would take me 350 miles. Because if you figure it's 100 calories per mile burned of energy to walk a mile, and there's 3,500 calories per pound of fat. So that's 35 miles per pound of fat times 10 pounds of fat. So I could walk 350 miles on my low percentage body fat, my 10% body fat body.
Yeah, that's going to get you a long way.
Well, I know it. Yeah, no, it will. It certainly will get you a long way in the context of survival.
Yeah.
A million years.
I actually was not being sarcastic when I said that. Yeah. Like that will actually get you a long way. Yeah. It's kind of shocking because you look at that, then you look at the normal American. How far could they make it? Now their muscles aren't going to take them that far. That's the problem.
Well, partly because their muscles are so used to burning glycogen.
Right.
And then stopping.
Right.
It's like you burn all that glycogen, you're carrying all that weight. And so it's literally glycolytic work to walk for some fat people. And so they're burning all the glycogen in their muscles. Just imagine being 350 pounds and walking upstairs. That's a glycolytic task. That is not a fat burning task. Right. Even though you're going slow, right? It's lifting weights. It's lifting heavy things. It's like it's like 150 pound person carrying a 200 pound weight up a staircase, right? So when you think about, well, wait a minute, why do overweight people, grossly overweight people, obese people have such a tough time losing the weight? Well, partly is because when they do the exercise, they burn through the glycogen. And so the brain says, well, the first thing we have to do is we have to go rebuild the glycogen stores. So we have to eat a lot of carbohydrate to rebuild the glycogen stores. So that's the brain kind of responding to the work that was done. So ironically, a lot of obese people never get to the point where they're good at burning fat because they run out of energy so quickly in depleting glycogen. The way around that, of course, is not through exercise. Exercise is eventually going to be a very critical component of achieving fitness, but it's not the best way to teach your body how to burn fat. It's through this carb restriction. So the best way to do this is restrict carbs, to start that process of burning, of consuming your own body fat, generating more mitochondria to burn the fat, and then building the metabolic machinery to burn the ketones that your liver is going to produce as a result of the cutback in carbs.
It's interesting. We shifted gears again into more of kind of a ketosis conversation, a ketogenic conversation. And, I get it in my Google feed. I get, articles almost every day, like some doctor talking about the dangers of going keto. And what are your thoughts on those? I mean, there's a lot of anti-keto conversation in the world.
It's crazy because, we are born with this factory setting that wants us to burn fats, that wants us to derive most of our energy, by the way, from fats, that expects us to not be consuming a lot of carbohydrate, that wants us to be good at utilizing the ketones that the liver makes as a fuel in place of carbohydrate, in place of glucose. So it boggles my mind that physicians would think that this mechanism that allowed humans to survive to this point today, to survive long periods of famine or even days without any food at all, just as a matter of routine for millions of years.
Up until about 12,000 years ago, right? I mean, that's when the farming took place, right?
Exactly. So as hunter-gatherers, it's amazing that we have this ability. If you think about it, if you look at how evolution sort of crafted the current recipe for a human, we're wired to overeat. Rob Wolf wrote a book called Wired to Eat, but we're actually wired to overeat.
Right.
And it's a good thing because food was so scarce for so many millions of years that when we came across food, we ate more than was enough to fill our, we'd fill our bellies, but more than enough to satisfy.
Yep.
And we had this amazing ability to convert those excess calories into stored energy that we carried around with us, very strategically placed on our butts, on our hips, because we walk upright. We have all these different, like you think about the fanny pack, except a fanny pack now is full of energy,
right?
Or carrying around, a couple of panniers on your bike full of energy. Well, we have this ability to store energy and keep it on our bodies and carry it with us.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that because if you've ever carried heavy weight in a backpack, like I typically go out on a morning ruck and I carry like 75 pounds. If you've ever done that, the place to carry that is on your hips. You have to have a good hip. You have to have a good hip belt. So you tighten that sucker down, and the shoulders get a little bit, but not very much if you've ever done it before. But I never really thought about that. Yeah, why?
No, and then women, are centered. This excess energy, this stored energy, which you have to think of as a good thing. You cannot think of it as a bad thing. It's stored energy. It allowed us to survive. We carried it with us. However, we also had this amazing ability to tap into those energy stores and use that energy whenever there was a scarcity of food, which was very frequently.
Yeah.
So the difference today is we still have this wiring to overeat, which all of us have. We still have this tendency to be very effective at storing excess calories as this stored energy, which we call body fat. But we've lost the ability to access that stored fat and use it as fuel literally from moment to moment. And so we become carbohydrate dependent because we can't burn fat. We don't know how to burn fat. We haven't trained our bodies to burn fat. And therefore we become carbohydrate dependent. Carbohydrates are a quick source of energy. They don't burn as clean as fat. They tend to be pro-inflammatory. And yet 12,000 years ago, we started growing grain crops, which were a boon to civilization because they allowed us to stay in one place. We no longer had to be hunter-gatherers. We could store this over the winter, over the cold months. We could have more children because we could feed them all now. We could we could all stay in the same place. We started because we could stay in the same place. We started aggressively scooping up tracts of land and calling it our own, and that was, as Jared Diamond says, that was the beginning of the downfall of humanity. Was when we started. Agriculture was the beginning of a real shift in humans that got us to where we are today, for better or for worse.
Yeah, it's funny. My son came home the other day and he had this big timeline. They're working on the kind of the history of he's in 6th grade and he's working on the history of humans. He had 6 million years ago and then he had today and he had the 10,000 year mark with, the agricultural thing. And he told me yesterday that today they're debating. He's on the side of hunter gatherers and the other half of the class is on the side of the farming. And we talked about, what are the advantages and the disadvantages. And he hadn't come up with the fact that we are, we've spent 5,990,000 years as hunter-gatherers. Our bodies are wired that way. Like we haven't changed in the last 10,000 years to account for farming and for agriculture, but we're eating that way. So that was another point on his debate today. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, but I mean, to add to the uncertainty there, you can't argue that one is better over the other. You can't argue that hunter-gatherer lifestyle is better than,
right.
an agrarian lifestyle, because look at where we are today. I'm talking to you from a 22nd floor of a high rise in Miami Beach.
Right.
Looking out over the marina. I've got, I got the world at my fingertips. I would not want to be a hunter-gatherer today.
Right.
But,
no, I can't imagine.
But I am. I'm wired. I'm basically genetically the same as a hunter-gatherer, and I have the same biological systems that evolved to expect a hunter-gatherer lifestyle.
Yes.
And that's what people I think people don't understand. And so the challenge is, how do you fit an agricultural-based society into a gene set that expects certain hunter-gatherer input?
Right.
It's certainly doable, and it's certainly achievable, and there's certainly a way to maximize both, but you have to have a ground of knowledge and understanding to be able to even begin to experiment in that field.
Well, I think it's interesting, from our previous conversation about fasting, how, the missing piece in the reason that we don't have the same, we don't have the access to burning the fat that they had back in those days, is the food is available everywhere. So it takes a tremendous amount of discipline to put yourself through these longer periods of famine that were required back when we were hunter-gatherers. Today you have to do that voluntarily. And I think that's a tough thing.
Well, it's a tough thing for most people. If you've done the work, and if you've spent some time in a very low carb way of eating, or even keto, then it's just a question of making up your mind.
Right.
Look, I mean, I still walk by a Cinnabon and go, holy crap, would I love to just chow down on one of those things. I still walk by a Mexican taqueria or any smells wafting out of any ethnic restaurant in the country and go, geez, I would love to go in there and just order everything on the menu and all the desserts, right? But the front part of my brain goes, that's just not going to serve you well.
Yep. And
you know what'll happen if you do that, and so don't, right? And that's that understanding that we eventually get at when we talk about seeing what we can get away with. We also have to know what our limitations are and where the edge actually is. For a lot of people, I mean, I have an employee who still drinks a lot of Coke, and it's like, I don't understand it, but he's like, that's what I grew up doing, and I love it, and it is what it is, and it's not worth it for me to give it up.
You haven't fired him? Come on, you're gonna get fired in the.
This is California, man. You can't do that.
No, totally. I'm kidding.
Coke discrimination.
Exactly.
No, and also I don't meddle in my employees' lives.
Yeah,
I mean, they have access to some of the most high-level information on the planet.
Yeah.
Working with me and around me. From there, it's their choice. And I certainly, I encourage my employees to live healthy and do whatever it's going to take to be the best manifestation of the person that they can be. But there's a point at which you just back off and say, it's not my life, it's not my business, it's not my job.
Yep.
I've done all I can. It's like saying, we want to go out and save the vegans and try and convince them that a little bit of meat isn't going to kill you. It's not worth the energy, because it's such a highly charged emotional and personal decision.
Yep.
So what I do is I just say, look, I'm just going to give you some information that I've culled from the research. Here's what it suggests how it might benefit you. Here's how it might serve you if you in your infinite wisdom elected to make this kind of a choice. That's all I'm doing. I'm not proselytizing for keto. I'm not proselytizing for even paleo or primal. I'm just suggesting that it's one way of doing things. It's been shown to be very effective. And so if you want to learn how to do it that way, I'm a good resource.
Right. Well, I think that's the mark of an effective, no pun intended, of an effective coach. You can't want it more than your client, and you can't want it more, for your family. If you get frustrated by your family members not following the recommendations that you give them, I mean, that used to be me. I would come home with the latest and greatest nutritional information, and I would tell my mom and tell my sister and expect them to change their life based on this new great information that I would bring them, and they wouldn't. And God, it used to drive me freaking bonkers. And over the years of doing this stuff, like I've realized, like, okay, yeah, you can't want it more for someone else, nor is it your job to want it more.
That's the main thing.
They've got to figure that out.
Yeah.
And figure out their path. Pardon the interruption, number 2, but I got to let you know, like I was alluding to before, this podcast survives, lives, breathes, thrives, and gets great guests because you guys show up. And the only way it grows is by you guys sharing the podcast with other people. And that allows me to bring in better guests and to do this more frequently. So do me a favor, do yourselves a favor as listeners of the podcast, share it. You can share an episode with somebody, you can send them an email, you can share it on social media, take a little screenshot of whatever episode you're listening to and say, hey guys, check out this podcast. You can even go to iTunes and leave a review. If you go to bit.ly/Andy Petronic podcast, you can leave a review. And reviews go a long way in helping the podcast to be seen in iTunes. So any of those ways, all of those ways, whatever you're willing to do, I'm grateful for. So thank you, and let's get back to the show. I want to talk a little bit about your the food products that you're doing now with Primal Kitchen. How in the world did you come up with mayonnaise? Like, why? Where'd that come from?
Well, so it started a couple of years ago. Actually in 2014, I realized that I've been writing so much about food on Mark's Daily Apple, and I'd written a couple of cookbooks. And every Saturday we publish a recipe. And I had this epiphany that when you cut out all the offending foods that we talked about in the first part of this podcast, when you cut out the processed foods, processed grains, even whole grains in some cases, you cut out the sugars, you cut out the industrial seed oils, you come down to a fairly short list of foods that are what we would call clean. 5 kinds of meat, right? Beef, pork, lamb, chicken, turkey, a couple of kinds of fish. Name me 17 vegetables you'll eat next year. And I guarantee you of those 17, there's 3 of them that you'll eat 80% of the time.
Right.
So the challenge is, how do you make clean eating? How do you make eating real food exciting? Well, you make it exciting by the sauces, the dressings, the toppings,
right,
the herbs, the spices, and the methods of preparation. And with those, there are an infinite number of ways in which to make great tasting, novel, exciting, sustainable dishes over one's lifetime. What I recognized was that the current offerings in the grocery sections, even in the health food sections of certain stores, even in health food stores, was abysmal in terms of the sauces and the dressings. And so I set out to create a mayonnaise, a ketchup, a mustard, a salad dressing, and a barbecue sauce in 2014. And after a year of tinkering and trying to get products that we could not just make that tasted great and had the best possible ingredients, but that we could make to scale. In other words, that we could make at a commercial facility without compromising. And the first thing we were able to complete was the ketchup. And so in 2015, in February 2015, we launched the mayonnaise.
So your first one was mayonnaise, not ketchup.
So the first, I'm so excited about our new ketchup. I can't wait to tell you about that. But the first one was the mayonnaise. Yeah. So we launched the mayonnaise to great fanfare in 2015. And, I'd like to say the rest is history, but we're the number 1 best-selling mayonnaise on Amazon.
Yeah.
We're the number 1 best-selling mayonnaise. We're actually the number 1 best-selling condiment in all of Whole Foods. We're in 9,000 stores across the country with the mayonnaise. It was a game changer. And it was a game changer because it's made with avocado oil, which is a very healthy oil made with it's high in monounsaturated fats, low in saturated fats, low in polyunsaturated fats. It's got a very nice neutral taste. Organic eggs. And so it's real mayonnaise. It tastes like mayonnaise. And my intent was I wanted to make a mayonnaise that I could use with reckless abandon on anything I wanted and feel good about it. And it turned out that a lot of people had given up on some of their favorite foods. Like they'd given up on tuna salad, potato salad, chicken salad, egg salad, coleslaw. They'd given up on a lot of these foods that required the use of mayonnaise because there were no good alternatives if you wanted to eat clean. Mm-hmm. So that was really the entry into this food space, was with a great tasting, clean label mayonnaise that that people loved and really felt good about using. From there, we expanded into salad dressings. We now have 11 flavors of salad dressing. We have the number one best-selling salad dressing in the natural channel. Our ranch dressing, our non-dairy ranch dressing.
That's the one that my son likes the most. And the mayonnaise.
We have, I think, 4 of the 5 top dressings in the natural channel by dollar volume sales.
What do you mean the natural channel? You mean is that like a category?
All the stores that position themselves as natural.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. So, Sprouts and Whole Foods and lots of, like 1,000 mom and pops, or co-ops across the country.
Erewhon, Rainbow Acres.
Yep. Bingo. So then, most recently, we decided that one problem, a massive problem that had not been solved for, was an organic, unsweetened, great tasting ketchup. So these are 3 boxes that you have to check off. It has to be organic, has to be unsweetened, and it has to taste great. So a couple had solved for 2, but no one had solved for all 3. So you'd have organic, unsweetened, tastes like crap. Or you'd have taste great, but wasn't organic and wasn't sweetened. So you had all these different mismatches. So we introduced this ketchup just like 4 months ago, and there's a trade show called Expo, the Natural Foods Expo East and Expo West. Mm-hmm. It's the biggest trade show of its kind in the world. And at the Expo East last month, we won 2 awards. They call them Next Eat Awards. It's like the Oscars of the food industry. We won the Next Eat for the best new condiment with the ketchup. But we won we won the Next Eat for the Consumer Choice Award. So that was out of all of the products in the entire convention, and I'm talking about tens, if not hundreds of thousands of products.
Wow.
We won the Consumer Choice Award for the ketchup.
Wow.
It's a game changer. And if you haven't tried it, you need to try it. It tastes great. It's something that you feel good about your kids eating on anything and everything. So we've had so much fun with this strategy of making better for you foods that finally fill a gap or a need in those people who've been reading labels for so long and gave up on ever buying store-bought dressings or store-bought condiments again.
How did you solve the sweet part of the ketchup?
God, it's like a trade secret because I'd have to. It's
like the recipe for a Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Sort of. Yeah, we use balsamic vinegar. Ah. So it's it's there on the label. Anybody can read it. So you can reverse engineer pretty much any product. But it was the balsamic vinegar versus regular vinegar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I have a bottle, and the one of the challenges, I love it. It's fantastic. I think I fall into that category. I think I used to love ketchup, and I really am so used to not using ketchup that I just don't even think of it anymore. But the combination of mayonnaise and ketchup on a burger for me is just phenomenal. Yeah. So I started using it again. But the interesting thing is putting it next to a regular ketchup, which my son has been eating now for his whole life. Yeah. Now the challenge is I just got to eliminate the standard one in the house because he's just gonna go to that. Like he just won't. I put them next to each other, and he's yet to really take on the taste of tomatoes and real tomatoes because he's so used to having the sugar in the ketchup. So that's just going to be a process. But
we have a lot of kids now who are asking for the Primal Kitchen ketchup. They automatically gravitate toward it. They love it. Obviously, moms are very thankful because that's been a sticking point for a lot of moms. Just as the mayonnaise was sort of a kind of an entry point for moms getting their kids to eat vegetables. So there's nothing like putting the mayonnaise on broccoli, for instance.
Yeah, no, I love to open the jar of the spicy. What's the spicy one called?
The chipotle lime.
The chipotle lime. I like to open that jar and I stick celery in it, and I just stick it. I literally just use it as like a dipping jar, and you stick it in and eat. And because I don't really like celery, but it's a great. It's a great vegetable to have. Like I like the crunchiness of it.
Yeah,
and there's no real flavor to it, but man, when you add it to the mayonnaise, it's fantastic. Yeah. So it's one of my favorites. And it's such a natural fit with all the other stuff that you've been up to. Tell us a little bit about the way your lifestyle has shifted. I was fascinated by, when you moved from the West Coast to the East Coast, just how things have shifted and how you orchestrate your life now around your fitness. Perhaps that's changed, or the way you look at the things you need to do for workouts as opposed to just walking around and getting steps and mobility. And
so I moved to Miami in December of last year. I had a Frisbee game every week in Malibu. Great game every week for the last 15 years. I found as good a game here in Miami. There's even a league. In addition to that game, there's a league that I can play in. I'm in Malibu. I was housebound. I had to get my car to do anything. I love my house. I had a great view and whatever. But if I had to go to the store, go to the gym, go paddle, go run, go swim, whatever, I had to get my car to do that.
Did you not run from your house? Did you have to go somewhere to go running?
No, I never ran from my house.
Wow.
I would have to get my car to do anything.
Wow.
Here, it's crazy. I haven't had a car for 8 months. I'm literally walking everywhere, and I'm taking an Uber if I have to go, long distances, like to go to the airport or something like that. Of note, the first month I was here, I was walking between 4 and 8 miles a day. I developed piriformis syndrome. I had severe sciatic pain because I had not walked that much.
Wow. In
recent history in my life. And part of it was because I was walking in soft sand every day on the beach too. So, I found there's great gyms here. There's a bike path right out my front door. I have a 6-foot skateboard with it's a land paddle.
Oh, is that the one with the thing?
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. What else? I mean, it's crazy. I'm having a great time. We're in walking distance of 20 restaurants.
Now, has your workout regime changed since your routine? Like, are you getting so much more movement and calorie burning, and because of just walking around that?
Well, what's interesting is I'm losing weight because I'm not working as much in the gym, and I'm walking a lot more, and I'm back to that sort of endurance.
Yep.
Metabolism, which is more toward, longer, leaner muscles rather than the strength and speed muscles. So it's interesting. I didn't necessarily want that to happen, but that is what is happening as an artifact of my walking so much here and probably not lifting as heavy or as frequently as I do or did in Malibu.
Right. Are you still doing?
It's all good. It's all great,
yeah,
and how it plays out on the Frisbee pitch is I'm a little bit faster and a little bit more lithe, jumping maybe a little bit higher on the Frisbee pitch as a result of not carrying around a little bit of extra upper body muscle. Are
you doing any speed work? Is Frisbee your speed work?
Frisbee happens to be my speed work most weeks. So it's an hour of 8-second sprints, basically, is what it is,
right.
With a lot of changing direction and a lot of quick acceleration and then quick deceleration too. So it serves that purpose, absolutely. In any weeks that I don't play Frisbee, I'll probably go to the beach and do some beach sprints.
Right. And what do you do for mobility? How does that factor in?
So that's always been my biggest deficiency is mobility. And I have a physical therapist now, work on me twice a week with the full onslaught of, the car sander buffer warm-up thing,
totally.
The Theragun, the lacrosse balls deep into the fascia, the screaming in pain. So I have a lot of body work done there. And then a lot of that is also his passive stretching of joints that need work. I guess that's probably on my bucket list. My biggest apologies to my good friend Kelly Starrett, because the guy, he's such a fountain of knowledge about mobility, and I just have not adhered to any rigorous schedule of maintaining that. And I recognize that as I get older, it's going to be more and more an issue for me.
Yeah. I think it's funny. You apologizing to him is a little bit like any one of your followers are apologizing to you for not eating better. So, like hopefully he's let go of the need for his people to actually do what he says to do,
Yeah. No, you're right. Same thing. He puts it out there, and if you choose to use it and employ it, great. And if you don't, he's fine with it.
Yeah. No, it's so you solved it by basically getting somebody else to do it for you.
I mean, I guess no. That's a good way to put it. I
guess one way to do it. If it's definitely one way to
subject myself to that amount of pain willingly.
Right.
So I pay good money for someone else to do it.
That's right.
And I'll tell you, it has manifested itself in some noticeable changes in my mobility. I mean, my sprinting is the best it's been in 5 years, and I'm 65 now. I mean, wow. And I'm still able to move pretty quickly. And I think that's a result of all of the breaking up of the nodules and all the other crap in my calves that allowed my Achilles, which has always been my weak point, to thrive. I think it also has to do with my taking the collagen as a supplement as well. But there are lots of I do a lot of things with the idea of improving mobility. I don't want you to think that I'm seizing up here as we speak.
Yeah, right, right. Well, you're probably naturally doing more things than most people would do, just because you've had a lifetime of as an athlete. So like I don't even really realize when I find I'm stretching my calves, or I'm stretching my hamstrings, or I'm moving in a way or sitting in a way where I'm extending or stretching or flexing or whatever, and most people aren't necessarily that in tune with those parts of their body. So yeah, I get it. What about sleep and stress? How do you?
So sleep, I think I do pretty well with. I'm very clear that I want to orchestrate my sleep schedule on a routine that I stick to. So I try to get 8 hours a night. I try to go to bed between 10 and 11. Wake up between 6 and 7. I'm pretty good about waking up just on 8 hours, regardless of what time I go to bed.
Has that been an evolution? Like, did you have to train yourself to be able to get 8 hours? I know a lot of people say, I can't sleep 8 hours.
Yeah. No, it's not been an evolution. Going back to my college days as a runner, I knew I needed sleep, and I needed a lot of sleep in college, and it was tough to be in a dorm and have parties going on above and below me, and my going to bed at 11 to get up at 7 and go for a run before class was just it's part of my routine, but it was antithetical to the college dorm lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I learned, first of all, I learned about white noise, background noise. In those days, I had a big window fan that I kept going, even in the middle of January in the Berkshires. I kept a window fan going. And that seemed to drown out a lot of the sporadic party noises. But also, and it's like a badge of honor for me to tell you this, but I've never pulled an all-nighter in my life. So I've never been up all night. The closest I came was I was on a 24-hour relay squad that set the world indoor record for this sort of arcane event called the 24-hour relay. It's 10 people. You relay. You run a mile, and then so number 1 runs a mile, hands off to number 2, who runs a mile, number 3, and so on, and number 10 hands up to number 1 again.
Yep.
So
is it on a track, or on a track, or is it
on a track? It was on a track, and this was on an indoor track, so it was a 12-lap fieldhouse track.
Wow.
In Williamstown, Massachusetts, we did 278 miles in 24 hours.
Wow.
But what it meant was that if you're running 5-minute miles, which is what most of us are averaging sub 5-minute miles during our 1 mile contribution. You'd run a mile, and then you'd get 40 minutes to rest.
Yeah.
But that's fine if the event starts at 10 o'clock in the morning, but then by 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, by 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning,
that's
when your rest period comes, you want to take a nap. So now you're just settling into a nap, and then they wake you up. You got to warm up before you go do your 5-minute mile again.
Absolutely.
So that was the closest I came to pulling an all-nighter. But
But many people would count that as an all-nighter.
I guess.
I don't know. That's tough.
That's the closest. Yeah. No, I really value my sleep. Now, stress is a different thing. I'm not good at managing stress. It's, I've gotten better. I've gotten more resigned to life's little ups and downs, and, grant me the serenity to recognize the things I cannot change, that sort of thing.
Yep.
But it's still probably my biggest failing, as a health advocate, is my own sort of inability to kind of deal with stress in a way that I think that I write about, for instance, or that I tell other people they ought to be handling.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
Well, it doesn't affect your sleep. So how does it affect you?
Yeah, it's just, and it's gotten much better over the years. I was a type A for a long time. It's gotten much better over the years. So maybe I'm even talking more about what used to be than what is now. But in business, you're always up against people trying to take you down, people trying to sue you, people trying to steal your whatever. Business is such a dog eat dog world, and a lot of times I take that stuff personally, right? And I shouldn't, but I do. So my methods are in dealing with stress. Paddling. I love to go paddling alone, so I'll go do an hour and a half stand-up paddle, being on the water, being with nature. Just the lapping of the waves against the board, or the swoosh of the oar, the paddle in the water, things like that are very meditative for me. I get some of my best thinking done. I get some of my best, it centers me.
Yep.
The same can be said for some of the long walks. In Malibu, I used to hike in the mountains. Pretty much all those workouts I do alone. On the beach here, in Miami, I can walk, 5 or 10 miles on the beach and just sort of, again, be with the water and kind of be in my thoughts, and that becomes my form of meditation. But those are my primary means of dealing with whatever, short-term stressors are there. But I guess, in retrospect, I've been talking about how bad I am at it for so long that it's become, part of my story. And that now that you make me think about it, it's like, no, I really haven't been at the effect of stress that much recently. So,
well, if you were to wave a magic wand and say, okay, now I'm going to incorporate a practice in my life that would enable me to say I'm no longer bad at managing stress, what would that be? What would you be doing differently than you're doing now? Yeah,
I hear from people about, meditation. Regular meditation in the morning is the key to it. I just can't sit still for that long. I've tried. And
how long do you think you have to do it for? Like an hour? What's the number?
That's my projection. Is maybe an hour. Yeah. You've talked to Todd White from.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Dry Farm Wines.
Dry Farm Wines. Yeah. Todd's a big meditator in the morning.
Yeah, I do too. I do 10 minutes every morning.
Okay.
That's big enough for me. I don't know how much Todd does.
Todd does an hour. So that's
forget that. Forget that.
If I started meditating, I'd go, well, shit, I have to go at least longer than Andy does.
11 minutes.
I'd be competitive in my de-stressing.
Absolutely. No, I'd say start with a minute. If you can sit still for a minute and take 10 breaths, that's usually where I tell people to start. But it'd be an interesting experiment to run.
Yeah, I think I'll do that. I will take that from this podcast, Andy.
Cool. I love it. I'll have to check in with you next time we talk.
Yeah.
What else? We've covered, I tried to actually make my list of all the things that we cover, the 7 daily habits and the whole life challenge, journaling and well-being practices and diet. Let's see, diet, exercise, mobility, sleep. We didn't talk about hydration. Where are you at with hydration?
Yeah, so I'm sort of known as that guy who doesn't really care that much about hydration. I wrote in my first book in the Primal Blueprint about this notion that we have a very, very intricate and sensitive thirst mechanism in the human body. And so I pay attention to my thirst mechanism. I drink when I'm thirsty and I don't drink when I'm not thirsty. This notion that we have to carry around a 1 gallon glass jug of pure water with us and finish it every day and pee clear, that just doesn't make any sense to me. In fact, I think it's probably not a very well thought strategy. So I'm all for hydration, but I'm also all for being intuitive about everything I do. I eat intuitively, I drink water intuitively, and as such, like for instance, I was the guy who when I was a cyclist, if the bike ride was going to be less than 40 miles, I didn't even bring water. It's like I didn't carry a water bottle with me because I knew I wouldn't be thirsty. Did that benefit me in the long run? I don't know. I just feel like I've done well with my current hydration strategy.
Well, let's see. 40 miles on a bike is would take you probably an hour and 10 minutes. 2 hours?
Call it 2 hours. Call it 2 hours on 20 miles an hour on an old steel bike or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, that was sort of the.
Because it's interesting. I got known back in the early days of CrossFit as I wrote this blog post once that was if you're breaking for water in a 20-minute workout, it's not a water break. It's a mental break because the workout's too hard. Like you don't need water. Stop drinking water. You don't need water. And one of the early ways I learned of my overneed or overthinking that I needed water was in adventure racing. I used to fill up this huge Camelback. We'd go out we'd have our transition area laid out, and I would have this. Let's see it must have been a 60-ounce Camelback, and I would.
And you'd forget to drink it, right?
I wouldn't even. I wouldn't. Well,
yeah, you'd be carrying an extra pound with you the whole race.
Or the opposite would happen, and I'd get in the kayak and I'd stick this brand new bladder in, and I'd down the whole thing, or I'd down half of it, and then I'd go to try to run after drinking like 30 or 40 ounces of water, and the water sloshing around in my stomach, and I'm feeling heavy as lead. And so I learned very quickly that in a 2.5 hour or 3 hour event, I might need one 20-ounce water bottle. Like that's about really all that I really needed to do. And, that doesn't mean I'm not depleted at the end. Of course I'm depleted, but I'm supposed to be depleted because it's a race, for God's sakes. So,
if you look at our ancestors and you look at evolution, we didn't have containers to carry water around until 20,000 years ago. So every ancestor, your predecessors got hydrated from licking the dew off a leaf. Right. Not even dipping into a crystal clear stream that was everywhere. It was like there was not that access to water wherever you turn. Yeah. And now it's great. And I think the idea that bottled water costs more than gasoline is just, to this day, just blows my mind. That people would spend more. They would complain about gas being $4.50 a gallon. But then they have no problem spending $2 for a 16-ounce bottle of, Dasani or something like that.
Yeah, it drives me crazy. I go into a gas station and I want a bottle of water, and it's more expensive than buying a Gatorade.
Yep.
Good God, where have we gone? I recently bought a Dr. Mark Hyman has this water purifier, because I've always been concerned about the water in Los Angeles. I don't know if I should be concerned about it, but I don't like the way it tastes. So I've had a Brita filter for a long time. But I bought this. It's a reverse osmosis countertop, and there are very few of those around. Most of them have to go under the sink, and they take a lot of space and they waste a lot of water. And I've been pleasantly surprised. I have to refill it a lot because I drink a lot of water. I probably drink like 70 or 80 ounces a day of water. So, but one of the things that I do, because it's so, it's ultra pure, there's basically, nothing in it, is I re-add.
No electrolytes in it.
There are no electrolytes. So I re-add Himalayan sea salt. I put in, I make like a slurry of Himalayan sea salt and water, and I take a dropper and I stick a dropper in like a half a gallon. And it brings the total dissolved solids up, and it seems to be working. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah. Well, we've covered the 7 daily habits of the Whole Life Challenge. We've caught up on a lot of your daily routines and habits, and I appreciate you being so open with your life. Like it's very cool to learn from the Siri thinks I'm talking to her. I don't know what I said, but Siri just popped on. I was going to say it's very cool to learn from not just what you talk about and write about, but like what's going on in your life. And it's inspiring for me. I always take something away from our conversations, and I just really appreciate you being that available to the people in the world.
My pleasure. Pretty much an open book. And, like I say, we talked about the experimental one early on, and I have chronicled a lot of those experiments. So happy to share the wins and the losses there.
Mark, what are the best ways for people to either find you, ask you a question, or to find your products and your websites and stuff? Where should they look?
marksdailyapple.com is the blog. We're in our wow, I just realized today might literally be the 12th anniversary of the blog. And the books are, the Keto Reset Diet, a New York Times bestselling book, available wherever fine books are sold. The Primal Kitchen foods, you can, again, at Whole Foods, Sprouts, Publix, Kroger, Costco. You can find them just about everywhere. Look for them. They're great. If you want to find out about them, primalkitchen.com, lots of information on the different products we have. And then I'm Mark Sisson Primal on Instagram if you want to take a look at my day-to-day comings and goings.
Are you on, like, yourself personally, or do you do a lot of the postings that you do, or do you do any of them? Or
to the chagrin of my team, I do all the postings on
really
on Mark Sisson Primal. Yeah.
Why to the chagrin? Are they like what?
Don't you want to post that? I'm like, no, I'm not posting that. But anyway, I have the keys to that particular driver.
Control the founder. Founder. Somebody grab the keys.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for being with us, and I look forward to the next time we do this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy. Take care.
Hey, it's Andy, and thanks so much for listening. If you want to know more about what I'm learning each month, head over to andypetronic.com and subscribe to my monthly newsletter. If you were touched, moved, or inspired by anything you heard today, chances are someone else you know would be too. Please take a moment to think about who and send them a link to this episode. And if you're super stoked, please head over to iTunes to write a review. The best way to keep current on guests and episodes is to subscribe so that the latest one will automatically get delivered straight to your phone. The apps I used for this are Apple Podcasts, Overcast, or Pocket Casts. The Andy Petronic Podcast is produced by our team, Winslow Jenkins, Becca Borowski, and Ernie Hurtado. Big thanks to Nikki Grudadaria for the artwork. You can find all of our episodes, links, and complete show notes at wholelifechallenge.com/podcast. I'm Andy Petronic. Thanks for listening.